Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the C-Man, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down. If you've been watching Kang, he's been on my chest all day, and we've been talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania in a spoiler-free way all day. I thought the best way to go about talking about this movie in more detail was to break it out. 5 things that I really loved about the movie, 5 things that I really didn't love about the movie, and 5 things that, we could maybe change. And we just finished our 5 things we didn't like. If you want to see what I didn't like about this movie, you can see it right up there. But now we shift into the things that I would do differently. What are we talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in, spoiler-filled, into Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and the 5 things that I would change about this movie that, in my opinion, would make it a top 10. And I'm very interested to see if you guys think that these changes could have made this movie like a top-tier Avenger type movie. Because for me, if you go back and you watch like the things that I liked about this movie, I think there's a lot of meat on these bones, and there's a lot here that really works, but it gets undercut a few times. And I think if you just changed or tweaked several things, you could really clean a lot of this up. So let's just not waste any time and dive right in, man. The first thing that I would change, and it's such an easy one. You don't have to shoot anything differently. You don't have to change the scene itself. I would just move where the Kang backstory of the quantum realm is to the front of the movie. The movie opens with Janet seeing Kang crash in the quantum realm, and then finding him kind of like reaching out on the ground. And then it cuts. We get like the Marvel Studios stuff, and then Scott's walking in the streets of San Francisco. And it then, from that point, takes about an hour until we see Kang. And then right around the time that we finally see Kang, Scott and Cassie run into him. Janet finally, after about an hour of dragging her feet, decides to tell Hope and Hank who is the big bad, why they should be afraid of him, and what her relationship is to Kang. And I like what's there. Like the idea of Kang kind of manipulating Janet, where it's like, this lady's really clever, she's super smart, she's techie, she can help me fix this thing. We don't let on who we are, and we can get out of here. All that stuff works. And then Janet, touching the core and getting all of the visions of the things that Kang has done. I love all of that. But where it comes in the movie, it takes too long for us to get there. And then as soon as you're done with that, you're telling MODOK's backstory. You get taken out for like 15 to 25 minutes of forward storytelling, going back to tell stuff. So I think if you just take the Kang piece out and just leave only telling MODOK's a little bit in the middle of the movie, and you slid Kang to the front, then you don't have to have Janet drag her feet at all, I think. That's one of the other things that we're going to talk about. But I think it allows the momentum to work a little bit easier, right? Like having MODOK tell Cassie and Scott how he got where he is makes a lot of sense somewhere where they're running into him. Like that's a good spot to go backwards. But to do it 2 times in a row, the momentum that you're building in those first 2 acts starts to whittle as you're like, okay, we're now telling us the stuff that we already know, right? Like we've seen Kang crash land, and we see the world that he's built here while we haven't necessarily seen him yet. Like you can see all the things that you're about to find out about that story, and I just think it doesn't make any sense to put it in the middle of the movie. Slide it up to the front. Tell us everything that there is with Kang, so then when you get into the movie proper, you get to that moment where Janet's like, all right, I got to tell you guys. You can cut away and be doing more stuff with Ant-Man and Kang and stuff, and then come back after the story was over to find out what their next move is. That, for me, would solve just probably the biggest issue for me, which is momentum, right? Like the narrative doesn't build the momentum, as we talked about, and the things I didn't like, the way that it needs to. And a big punch to that is that section of backstory telling. And if you would have just slid all of that up to the front, I think the pacing, the rest of the movie, you can just move, man. And then when you get to MODOK and tell that backstory, it's not taking you out of it too much. The second thing that I would have done, and I teased this a little bit in the last video as well, I would have put Hope with Scott and Cassie, not Hank and Janet. And I say that because this is Ant-Man and the Wasp. And you have the OG Ant-Man and the Wasp and the new Ant-Man and the Wasp. I would have kept them together. Yes, I get that, like, Scott's getting time back with Cassie, and Hope's getting time back with her mom, and Hank's getting time back with his wife. I get all those things. But that's happening off screen too, guys. Like, we understand that Hope's been just relishing having her mom around. We got that vibe in the last Ant-Man movie. So I don't think you need to do that, let alone it really doesn't do, like, that whole stretch doesn't do anything for Hope's character, not even with Hope and Janet, right? They just give you moments where Janet can be like, I just wanted to be a mom. And if you put Hope with Scott and Cassie, that becomes more compelling immediately, because then the family thing you're talking about in this movie is the forming of that Scott, Cassie, and Hope family, right? Like, Hope and Scott have kind of been so close to being a thing, and then at odds, and then so close to being a thing, that by the time we get to them, they are a thing. Let me feel that world. Let me see how Hope and Cassie get along. Like, that's a friendship that I would have loved to have seen being built in the movie. And you immediately start giving better things material-wise for Evangeline Lilly to do, and you enhance the stuff that I think that's going on with Scott and Cassie, and I think that you could really have Kang kind of duping all three of them at the same time, where it's like the only people that know are Hank and Janet, and they're the ones that are coming. And if you leave Hank and Janet off on their own, I think you cut out that Bill Murray sequence because it's terrible, and you focus on Hank and Janet doing an Ant-Man and Wasp story where, yeah, they're not in the suits, but you're getting a classic, like, Hank and Janet team up. We've never gotten to see that. Let's get a ship. Let's go find the ants. Like one of these things where, again, they do like a bit of exposition where Hank, toward the end, when they talk about the ants, is like, after the ants are showing up, he's like, yeah, I was getting signs. And you're like, they do the flashback where you see the moments, and I literally was sitting there going, I don't even know if that actual moment or that thing was there. But you see the ants get sucked in right at the beginning of the movie. So instead of dragging your feet on the ants so they can just show up at the end to mess with Kang and make it feel unearned, I think you could have had Janet and Hank, they crash land. They're like, oh man, we got to get back to Cassie and Hope and Scott. And they're moving in that direction. And you see Hank have one of these visions and being like, I think my super intelligent ants are down here. And if if Janet and Hank's story becomes trying to track down the ants because they have to stop Kang, like, you could have Janet be ready to, like, once you realize what's going on, Janet's just like, Hank, I messed up. I got to tell you something. Cut, show me what's going on with Hope, Cassie, and Scott. And then you come back and it's like, okay, I've been having these visions about ants. If we could find them, we might be able to help them more than just searching the quantum realm trying to find them. And you could still have them run into the rebels, build all that stuff, give you your Star Wars-y vibe. You could have really had a real fun Star Wars, like, side story with Hank and Janet and have them find those ants, understand how intelligent they are, and then the ants and the rebels bum rush the base. That creates a distraction for Cassie to get in or Hope to get in to disable things, and then you can still have the fights go down the way that, right, Kang's already down there. He starts going nuts, so maybe he's going after Cassie or Hank or Janet, right? And, like, you got to bring everybody back down. Like, you could still get everything you get action-wise the same, but just enhance the story for our main characters and not undercut Kang so much by building up to the ants. Like, the ants are coming. They're going to be the thing that makes you look over here so that we can do this thing over here. That's the heist, right? Like, the heist in the movie should be getting out of the quantum realm through Kang's tech. So once, once everybody's able to put things together, like, I don't know. I just think you get better narrative and better stories if Hank and Janet are on their own and you're focusing on Hope, Cassie, and Scott. Like, that for me is just more compelling, and it gives everybody better material. Like, everybody gets better narrative and better things to do from an acting perspective, I think, with those storylines. Now, we've already said this a little bit here, but number 3, like, I wouldn't have had the ants show up the way that they do. I think if you would have had Hank and Janet find them, build them up a little bit, and then they show up and are very clearly just a distraction, you don't undercut Kang. The way that they just show up out of nowhere and carry him off, and you're like, wait, that's the guy. Like, that would have never happened to Thanos. Thanos would have snapped them out of existence, right? Like, one of these where I think there's a way where you can do it, where if they're serving more as a distraction that's clearly a distraction than let's whisk Kang off camera where it's like, oh man, he lost, we can go do things, and then he can come back right as we're about to be, completely out of it, right? Like, I would not have used the ants in the way that they use them. And like I said, I think if you would have built a story around Hank and Janet and the ants, you could have just found more compelling things. Maybe the ants somehow like ended up somewhere with like the rebels, like anything where you could have built that story. Like, I'm just sitting there going, these ants that were already super smart with some of the tech that Hank had them using, like, experienced hundreds of years while they traveled down there. Why did that happen? Why didn't it, like, and I get that you could have those pockets and whatever, but like, I don't know. I just felt like the ants in general, if we were going to use them, they needed more story. They needed more building to feel more earned when you hit that moment. Number 4 for me, you got to have Luis and those guys in this movie somewhere. Michael Pena, T.I., Das Malchian. Das Malchian got in the movie, but like those 3 guys are one of the rare spots in the MCU that are like characters just specific to Ant-Man. You're not going to see those characters pop up in an Avengers movie. You're not going to see them pop up in a different, spot. Someone like Wong, who we're seeing like pop up all over the place. Those are guys that are specific to that world, and that was a piece of the world that just was severely missing for me. I mean, if you could have had Luis filling in Scott on the 5 years that he missed to open the movie, or have Luis running you through the things that are going through Scott's head as he's walking to that book thing, or you have him like setting up stuff or talking about setting up stuff with Scott, like maybe when Scott's walking there, he's on the phone with Luis. Anywhere you could have just inserted those 3 guys for a little bit. I mean, you're talking 2-3 minutes tops. This movie, I think, just would have worked a lot better and would have felt more like an Ant-Man movie. Like, one of the bigger critiques I had coming fresh out the theater was that it felt like some of the Ant-Man glue was missing. Like, Cassie was what was holding it all together, but there were other Ant-Man things, the ants, which, they do show up, but like them not being around, even though we see them get sucked in right at the beginning, just different things that, if done correctly, this feels more like an Ant-Man movie and not something that's not like an Ant-Man movie. And granted, this movie had to do more than what the other Ant-Man movies did. It had to be bigger because we had to level up Scott and Hope. And the movie does accomplish that, but you could have done all of that and still had it feel a lot like an Ant-Man movie by having Luis and those guys show up at some point. And the last thing that I would have done, I would have given Kang a different post-credit scene. While I love the Victor Timely moment, that's not the post-credit that I need in that moment. Like, in that movie with what we're given, I need to know what happened to that guy. Like, where did Kang the Conqueror go? As a comic book fan, like, someone who doesn't know the comics, doesn't know Kang, you watch that movie, and that's like a traditional, oh man, bad guy lost, he's probably dead, we'll never see him again. But as a comic book fan, you've built this and said that this guy is the Conqueror so many times. Like, you casted Kang the Conqueror. There are so many versions of Kang. You didn't have to do the Conqueror if he wasn't going to be the Conqueror. Show me where he ends up. Instead of giving me Victor Timely, save that for Loki. Give fans a nice, like, when Victor Timely pops up, you're just like, the way I felt in the theater, I was like, holy shit, they just did Victor Timely after doing Immortus and Ramatut and Scarlet Centurion. Like, this is nuts. You could have saved that for Loki and still had that response from fans and given me a moment where we see exactly where this Kang shows up. My gut says that he got shot to a different universe. Hitting that multiversal engine core didn't blast him into oblivion or make him disappear because he's even smaller than Quantum. I think it sent him someplace. And it's very likely that that place or that universe that he landed in is Loki's. Maybe he ends up in the quantum realm. Maybe he ends up, somewhere where he's able to catch on to something and land in that world that Loki ends up getting pushed into at the end, where you see the statues of Kang the Conqueror. Like, maybe based on what has happened to him in the movie, he's now got a different way of thinking, going, you know what? If I don't have He Who Remains anymore, I can just do this shit myself. And I say that because I very much think that Kang the Conqueror is the reason that He Who Remains is at the end of everything. If Kang couldn't be there himself, I would bet money that he handpicked someone to do everything. This Kang said he's seen the end of time, which means he's seen the story that that He Who Remains has been in charge of. In the comics, Immortus is kind of in control of a lot of that stuff about where you go and where you're nipping and things, but that's the stuff that He Who Remains is doing. I think the Conqueror put him there to keep the rest of the council and the other powerful Kangs from getting to him, pruning timelines, changing things. It's all to benefit the Conqueror. And I very much think that that's why when He Who Remains is like, if you kill me, there's going to be a lot more Kangs coming, and they're not what you want to face. And it's one of these things where, yeah, that happens because the minute that He Who Remains is killed, then the council is able to banish our Conqueror. And if the Conqueror gets out and lands in a spot where it's like, oh man, the TVA doesn't have He Who Remains anymore, that must be, I guess you couldn't do it that way because Kang has been in the quantum realm for so long. So, but I still do think that. No, I guess that can't work, huh? I thought I was onto something. Maybe. I don't know. But either way, like the vibe that I'm getting when you see Kang in the TVA and stuff is like, I think he's aware that the TVA existed. I think He Who Remains in him maybe were in cahoots for a little bit, and maybe something was able to allow them, like maybe it wasn't a real banishment, like maybe just something backfired and sent Kang to the quantum realm. Whatever it is. But the moment that he's taken out, that thing that is allowing the Conqueror to be in power, so to speak, is gone. Well, if he ends up in that universe, it would make a lot of sense for him to take that over, to try to build himself up to take on whatever. If you're going to use that version of Kang at all going forward, I would have done a post-credit that showed where he showed up. And if it is indeed the Loki universe, then you're teasing Loki that way too. I just think it would have made more sense to see where he went, because not seeing it leaves questions that, like, I don't think you want unanswered in a world where you have to wait for so many things to fall into place before you can get to certain stories. Or two, like, the other option is that we never see him again, and you gave us like a throwaway Kang in this movie, which I think would undercut this movie even more. So I just would have tweaked what the post-credit was in some way to show what happened to Kang. Like, keep that council scene. That council scene is, God, that's glorious, man. I mean, I've been talking about Rama Tut for a while. Immortus, like, to see those three pop up and then get Victor Timely on the backside. Like, the only person that we're missing is Iron Lad, who I'm sure at some point will probably appear to help out the good guys. Like, there are good versions of Kang, just as many as there are bad. And, like, it's cool to see those guys, but I didn't need Victor Timely. I could have waited for Loki for that. Don't give me a clip from the show. Like, I know that's an old school post-credit thing from Marvel. Let's show an actual clip from the next thing that's coming. But showing us what happened to the guy that Ant-Man and the Wasp fought, all that stuff that Scott's thinking about in his head and worrying about, you solidify it in both places, because I do genuinely think that we're not done with this version of Kang. Like, this Conqueror, I think is going to come back. And if that's true, that's where I would have had the post-credit kind of lead you to what was next for that character. So there you go, man. 5 things, some of which kind of merged together, but those are the things that I would change. I would move the Kang story to the front of the movie so it doesn't take you out of the building of momentum that you have going for our story that's happening in proper time. I would have separated Hope from Janet and Hank, put her with Cassie and Scott. I think that creates compelling stuff for them. Having Hank and Janet have their own, like, little Ant-Man and the Wasp story that could have built in the ants more, so that doesn't feel like it undercuts Kang. I would have done that. I would have used the ants. If you weren't going to do that, I would have made the ants be a distraction earlier on that just misdirects Kang. Doesn't look like they beat Kang in some way. And I would have had the 3 guys come back. I mean, you need T.I., you need Michael Pena, you need Dasmalchian in living form in this movie somewhere, I think, to make it feel a little bit more like an Ant-Man movie. And then I would have shown where Kang ended up. You do those things, I think this is a top 10 movie easy, because the action is there, the visuals are there, and the heart of the story is really there. I think you just move a few things around, and all of a sudden, like, you would have had people walking out going, shit, man, like, the Avengers are in trouble, and, like, Ant-Man and the Wasp didn't win. They're just delaying the inevitable. And there are elements of that in the end that I think you could have just defined clearer. Like, it doesn't all have to be a surprise. There are so many people that read these books and can spin theories that by the time you get to the next place we see Kang, whatever is going to happen has probably been said somewhere or is relatively close. So don't answer some of those questions. I don't know. I think this is a movie that it could have been an easy home run that starts Phase 5 off in a way where you're like, dude, Marvel's back. If you had issues with the last phase, like, whoo, Quantumania's got me going. It was there. You just needed, I think, to tweak a few things. So there you go. I'm going to shut up. I've told you everything I would change about the movie. Now I want to know, what are you thinking? Do you think my changes would have enhanced this movie, would have made it better? Did you have things that you would have changed that could have made the movie better? And if you haven't seen the movie, I'm sorry that you're watching spoilery things that are telling you things that happened in the movie and that should have happened in the movie. But that's more on you than on me, but I'll still apologize because that's the kind of guy I am. But anyway, man, anything that you guys got on what you would have done to Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania to make it better, or if you think there's any way that could have made this thing a top 10 Marvel movie, put it down below in the comments section. I look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the C-Man anytime we're talking movies, TV, trailer, reactions. We're done talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania outside of the comment section. So The Last of Us, I feel like lots of people are watching that. You want to see, I got some coverage. I'm telling people, showing people like the show and the game simultaneously, breaking things down, reacting. I'm crying my eyeballs out every week on camera. If those are things that appeal to you and you want to be here for that kind of stuff, you just want to show a little love and support because you like the way this old crazy brain works, well then, hey, come join C-Maniac Nation. It's super easy. All you got to do, jump over there, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema, sit down. I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace. Oh, you guys are still here. You snuck up on me. You must be looking for more of this guy. Well, I got two video options for you, man. Right up here and right over here. And if you want all those C-Man goodies, well, hey, come join the squad right on over there, and I'll catch you on the next one.